Mr. presents no guest in the studio. I captured Nicoletta at Dog-Eared Books on Castor Street on the 27th of August. Today we will be playing that conference talk that Danny gave in honor of his fantastic newly released book, LGBT San Francisco, fresh off the press. Daniel Nicoletta, master archivist of the photographic realm. This is Dog-Eared Books on August 27th. Enjoy.
Please join me in welcoming one of our great San Franciscans, Dan Nicoletta.
The thing that I would like to impart is just that, not unlike the film festival, which started out, with in tandem with Mark Eustace and 15 other people, where we were literally using a bed sheet and my Super 8 projector, and it was a humble beginning. It was because it was an idea whose time had come, it grew exponentially, and we have these really sort of grown-up versions of that in the community now, and I think that if people are new to forming queer identities in a community setting and making creative work in a community setting, and you're frustrated by the austerity of what you're faced with, I would say just keep in mind that it's gonna grow. And for me, I know that so dearly because I was so thrilled to be here. So it really didn't matter what the fiscal dimension of what I was doing at the time was, but I literally would get off the bus from my 9 to 5. I would go to Safeway to buy a brick of Velveeta cheese, and then if I knew I had my lunch food for the whole week, for my day job, I knew I could spend the rest of my money on beers at the Stud and Tri-X film. So I made it work. I would say that there were two main threads in my body work, and I think it's really obvious. It was the Cockettes and their lineage, and Harvey Milk and what happened with him. And obviously I branched out and had other themes going on, but those were the things that were kind of my anchors. And so I think that when I first got here and I kind of didn't know who I was, to be able to sort of follow the theater people around and try to get the definitive shot of them, and to think in terms of theater photography, that was sort of a career template that I had. I don't know how realistic it was, but it was what I was putting together. And I did think at one point I would be a filmmaker, but I think by the time I hit Harvey's Camera Store, I started to put together that film I would never make any money. So I stopped making films and started shooting stills, because there was often a little sort of financial turnaround that was a little easier. But I had also seen the great book by Max Waldman called it's called Waldman on Theater, and it was done in the 60s, and it had all the amazing theater companies of New York in it, and they did a spread in Life magazine, and I saw that when I was really young, and it was like Glenda Jackson and Murat Saad, and first heard about Charles Ludlam, the Ridiculous Theater Company there, and it's these beautiful, like, grainy photographs of these amazing actors, Grotowski, and on, in front of black backdrops. So that was also where I started to think in terms of the studio dream of having a studio one day. And so theater was always there. And when I got here, the Cockettes had already disbanded, but the branch off from the Cockettes, the Angels of Light, were still going strong. And I coincidentally ended up romantically involved with Stephen Brown, who was in the group, and he said, "Why don't you come down and photograph one of my shows?" And it was a really blessed experience. And the thing about that world is there was tons of hybridization. Like, eventually, everybody, even people who were feuding, ended up being in each other's shows. It was kind of, it was kind kind of weird that way. Like Doris Fish, who figures heavily in my body of work, I chased her around like a little puppy dog, just because she rolled into town from Australia, and I was like, who the fuck is that, And she, I don't know if you know the Doris story, but she really is part of that group that Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, is based on. So she brought that whole aesthetic into town, and of course the angels who I was already working with were also like, well, who is she? And like within a year they were doing shows together, so it was very exciting. And of course the whole time this is happening, I'm working at Harvey Milk's camera store, and he's trying to get elected, and it's high drama over there. It's the world is changing right under your feet. And for example, when the first campaign that I worked on, he hired me as a clerk because they were entering his second supervisorial campaign, and I couldn't believe he lost. I mean, that's how politically naive I was. I was so invested in the dream that was happening there in that epicenter that come the election night, I was in tears because I was basing the results on the sheer willpower of the volunteer force, and so it was a bit of a surprise, and all the pundits were like, no, he could have never won this one, but we did good, we did really good, and that's sort of that same theme of, it starts small and then it builds, so you have to have a little bit of faith, and really the book is no different in a way. I had dreamed of doing a book. I would say it sort of dates a little later, because after I met Mike in '82, I went back and got my BA, and I actually interrupted my BA to work on Castro Street in Harvey's camera store. That obviously Castro Street became my university. And so when I finished school and I got a BA in photography, I was taking feminist art history. I was like one of 3 guys in the class. And it was an amazing class with Whitney Chadwick. She's a real powerhouse. She wrote a book on women in the Surrealist movement, and she was tough, man. She was not having no nonsense. And I did my paper on Diane Arbus, and I did it on the feminist dimension, or the absence of it, really, in her case, in Arbus's work, and I remember going to the San Francisco State and reaching up on the shelf to get a copy of the Arbus book to study and do this paper, and just really feeling the energy of being able to reach up and take a book down off the shelf of someone who inspired me, and get the message in that moment, that gesture of some young kid reaching up on the library shelf and taking something down that's then going to inform their identity. I wanted that for myself, and I never let go of that dream. And I knew I had to be patient, and some of it was informed by the fact that I had to build a body of work, and I was super invested in shooting. I didn't want to slow down to do presentation. I didn't even want to do exhibits ultimately. And we did do them because that's kind of what you do, but I always sort of felt like I was a shooter and that I would eventually get to some place where I could then figure out what it all meant, and that was moving to Oregon 4 years ago. And so it was a way to sort of quiet myself down. Our place up in Oregon is very monastic, and it was surprising to me how much focus it takes. But I got to do it within my lifetime, which was really such a blessing because of HIV and so many of my friends created incredible bodies of work and didn't get to edit and put it together in their own voice, and I saw that happen over and over again, and I just thought, watch your step here. You don't want to be to now that you are in a monastic place, really, and then the universe provided. I mean, Tony finally, after a couple of years of saying, I haven't forgotten you, I want to do a book, he came up to Oregon and he looked at the work and he said, okay, let's do it, And then he had 2 more trips, and he did his selections, and then I did a couple months of just working with the cadence of the book, and then also the inclusiveness of the book. And then I counter-proposed, like really at the 11th hour, I said, I like what you're doing, but I gotta have this, this, and this, and this. And this is why. And I kept, he's a funny guy. He'll put up a little bit of a fight, but then he's really listening, which is such a great gift for an editor. And I kept on lording over him. I said, you don't want to be the next Roland Emmerich with this community, It's like, you gotta listen to me on these matters. And he did. And it happened really at the very 11th hour when there was just no messing around. So I give him that he paid attention to my vision and our community's vision at a point where probably almost the editing should have been done with, like there was a real organic complexity there that was driving all of us crazy, but we understood that it had to be, and we got it.
We're listening to Danny Nicoletta at Dog-Eared Books on 27th of August, an intimate book tour talk, which I got privy to and shot from tiny little corner of the good old-fashioned bookstore. Very, very well curated, very impressed. Danny is talking about the release of his brand new book, crowning decades of his recording San Francisco's underground and LGBT scene. He was there in the trenches when Harvey Milk was running. He was working at Harvey Milk's photo store. He now lives in Oregon and finally got time to put it all together and make sense out of it. So this is DannyNicoletta.com, where the book is featured here on the right side. You'll find plenty about Danny and his career over there, DannyNicoletta.com. The press that is putting the book out is Real Art Press, realartpress.com, and there are a few pictures for you to browse through and discover the book. Any internet search with Danny Nicoletta and San Francisco LGBT contents will take you to him. On Mr. What Presents, there are some clips. One that I shot in 2010. Danny Nicoletta, let's watch this for a second.
This is a retrospective of sorts. It's very Harvey Milk-centric because I had the good fortune of working in Harvey's camera store. I was a mere 19 and a half years old when him and Scott Smith asked me to come work for them. And so this wall is a lot of the stuff that I shot as a young filmmaker and journalist, and I love this one because it's out of focus. This was the moment when Harvey came back to the camera store. We all became aware that he had won the election as one of the first openly gay elected officials in the world. Back then, when the photographer jumped in front of me as I was about to take the shot, I wasn't so happy about this picture, but now, 35 years later, it means a lot that it's actually out of focus because it sort of conveys the passing of time.
It's a very interesting show because it encompasses the past, the present, and it shows you the future. And there's a wide range of color in the work, there's a wide range of politics, there's a lot of content in it. And also what I'm seeing here tonight in the crowd, so many people that I haven't seen for about a decade. They all turned up for this show.
I'm taking photographs of all the stars.
Danny Nicoletta is one of the few people that's seen every stage of San Francisco for the last, since he's been here, since early, I guess the mid-70s.
It's been great to work with the Thrill Peddlers. As you can see, I have homage to the Coquettes, and I've been down there almost as much as you have been, Rob.
Thrill Peddlers and the Coquettes is definitely where I got very aware of Danny's work, and we started collaborating more closely as I occasionally would need some pictures from his archives to illustrate and enhance some of the clips I was making about the Thrill Peddlers and the revival shows that they were doing, revisiting the Cockettes, Canon, and the Angels of Light. All right, let's get back to Danny Nicoletta at Dog-Eared Books.
This is for us, by us, and maybe in 40 years, nobody will know who those folks are, but it's important to me and it's important to us to see the people who have stepped up, the Donna Sachets and all of that. So, you know, I wanted transference, I wanted total enmeshment, and it took its toll, quite honestly. And then I figured out how to figure it out, and so things are happening a little more detached than they were when I was a kid. But I would never trade it for anything in the whole world, and the suffering was manageable. It just was, you know, you just kept on, and it still happens today. I think there's this thing with portrait photography where there is, and that's on the ground floor. It's actually good that there is no filtering. That basically, when you start to work with somebody, if they emerge as a true and authentic friend over the course of the collaboration, that to a photographer is actually gold. You know, it's like we want that sort of like rich experience, but I think the expectation is complex, and so to have some sort of self-care in place where we are open. And you're recognizing that this is a metaphysical gift from that person. They are sharing their soul with you. That if you have that sort of background noise going on for yourself and you're open and your self-care is in place, then a lot of magic can happen because you have kind of worked all that out. So if somebody's coming at you with inordinate expectations for what the exchange will become, you can basically then, you know, help them understand that it might be something that's not what they're thinking. You know, if you choose to be enmeshed with somebody, then do it. You know, it's kind of like you know what your barometers are. You know, because I come from a place of carnival. Like, I think human curiosity is one of the best features of the human being, and I would never want to police that, ever. I do think the inundation informs every facet of life right now, and I think that anybody who would choose to do some sort of narrative about any topic would really want to factor that in, you know, but because you don't really want to do something that is pedestrian. Ultimately, you've got to kind of find a way through the inundation, but then and then the other thing that's happening is the art world is embracing austerity, in the sense that people who are operating from photographing their own queer vernacular is really celebrated now, and rightfully so. I mean, in a way, one of the problems with my body of work is I was so focused with theater people and people in exhibitionistic mode, and I overlooked the queer vernacular, which, as any historian will tell you, is where the real chestnuts of information are. So I wished I had been more of a vernacular photographer, but my career is it's kind of winding down, so that's a sort of wishful thinking, but I think that's what's up for anybody who's an insider that wants to do a narrative about queer identity, is going to have to sort of factor that what's outside into what they're going to do to make something different, you know. And really, what I knew from my proximity was that Harvey got involved because he had this profound sense of indignation that he could not have same-sex companionship in the world in a safe way. That was what he devoted his life to transforming. And he said it when he said, I did this in the eye of the movement. So I think he, and then in another instance he said, even though we did all this other great work in other subsets of the communities, the gay movement was really at the core of my own vision. And so when you see his love letters, when you see a photo like that, or even he was a photographer and he did beautiful semi-erotic work of his lovers, you can get that information by looking at that work, that Harvey was a lover of men, and that really fed his soul, and that was what fueled what he did do, and what level he devoted himself at. We were having this ebullient moment where exhibitionism was king, and so, quite honestly, us photographers were even slightly predatory on that reality, but it was also playful. Then you really would never attach the word predatory to that, because there was a sort of innate consent, But it's not that way anymore, and so I think every photographer has to rethink it. There's still consequences, so it's and the asking should go both ways, and it did in my case. For this book, I had several conversations around the semi-erotic work where somebody might be having career changes. I'm really trying to be sensitive to the sitter's needs. I don't want to do anything that's transgressive that will harm them in their daily lives. I mean, that's a bottom line for me. So yeah, it's tricky stuff, because some of us are way already quite visible and totally okay with sharing, and those people will be that way for the rest of their lives, and I don't feel compelled to broker or precious permission with them. And that's also one of the beauties of our community, and one of the things this book celebrates. But there are people that have either changed their ways of life and may need to have that conversation, and did have in my case. And I think it's on the photographer to do that. I could have very easily ended up one of those kids that killed themselves because of lack of support. I truly feel that, even though my parents were great. I mean, they weren't great on the gay thing, but they, I was middle class at that point. So I had a lot of sort of good things in place. But on the queer thing, all it takes is that one false move where you have some trauma or drama, and you do think you're the only person in the world that has this problem, and the kind of support we have now didn't exist. And so I've always felt, thank God, because I saw those pictures, and then I started to see Versailles pictures of Paris in the 30s, and even though those were staged in gay bars, to even see what the inside of a gay bar might look like was huge for me. So then I morphed from being the Diane Arbus of the gay community to the Versailles of the gay community, and then I was the Abaddon of the gay community, and now I'm just me. Should we sign some books?
Yeah. Okay.